Hi students, welcome to Module 1. This is the video lecture for BA 149 Technology for Interpreters. So I'm really excited that this particular topic for this Module 1 is something that I'm very familiar with. We're going to be covering voice remote interpreting. So we know that especially during the pandemic, more and more of us had to use and almost soon became synonymous with the pandemic, right? So we almost had to switch, especially for those of you that were taking in-person classes, we had to switch rapidly to technology. So technology has impacted really the work of interpreters and translators, and we're going to be reviewing that regardless of your language. We're going to be reviewing that throughout the 8-week course. So just remember to start in the order that your module is. That is for a reason. So start way at the beginning at the introduction. Look at the resources, the PowerPoint, the video lecture, the resources, and then your assignment for this particular week. There's a very important video. Know that I've also had this video in some of my former classes, but please make sure that you watch that video. It's the differences between interpreting and translation. If you've taken my previous courses, BA 130 and BA 131, we do some written translation. So it's also important that you know the differences. Just for those of you that haven't taken, because in the program, in the certificate program and in the associate degree program for interpreting translation, the classes are not in any particular order. So I'm going to go over some material that is, it might be a refresher for some of you. So the most important thing also is to remember that you could do remote interpreting using any of the three modes of interpreting, right? Consecutive interpreting, which you wait till your source and then you translate. So you wait for a short period of time, you register what it is that the speaker is saying, and then you translate. It is harder to do simultaneous interpreting over the phone, but it is something that is also done in remote video interpreting. And then, of course, the site translation more and more, especially during COVID, that was done also via more remote video remote interpreting. Other very important terms to remember and to refresh for those of you that already know this, just please go along, is the source language. So I know that many of you are in the Vietnamese English interpreting program, and many of you are in the Spanish English interpreting program, but this is still the same. The source language is still the same, and the target language in terms of definition. So we want to know what the source language is, right? Whether it's Vietnamese or Spanish, and then the target language you're translated to English or vice versa. So the main the main topics that we're going to be discussing for this module, and that's Frida in the background. I'm done editing my videos. It just got too time consuming, so she's mostly she's in most of my videos. So the in person we also refer to as face to face, right? So that now, especially I work at a school district, and just in recent months they were still having remote interpreting. So just in December of last year is when they started to have the special education individualize the IEP meetings with parents and students and staff in person. But prior to that, they still continued to do them remotely. And I think more than anything, even though now people are taking more precautions with COVID and masking, I think really what happened is convenience, time in terms of time management, the location, the distance, the barriers with distance. So that just made it more convenient for a lot of people to continue to do the video remote interpreting. We also have the telephonic, which is often referred as OPI, over the phone interpreting. So that is something very common to say, are you doing freelance work for an OPI, right, over the phone agency? More and more, I know that at one point my district had a shortage of interpreters last year, and they contracted a company that would provide over the phone interpreting. And there wasn't very much of a pre-session. It was just right on the spot. We were told to call and request an interpreter 30 minutes before the meeting. So it wasn't any preparation or anything of that. So they did know that it was specific for IUP. So they had assured my district that their interpreters had experience interpreting for school districts and special education. So now the video remote is often referred as VRI, which is the video remote interpreting, and that's just over video. So you use the audio that's on your computer, right? And some people, I've seen them do video interpreting also with their phones. The challenges to that could also be your internet connectivity, and I say that from experience because once I called in remotely, right? And I logged in remotely and to do a Zoom interpreting for a board meeting for a school district. And I started to have low internet connectivity. So there's some challenges. There's a link there. There's some resources for you also to review where the challenges, and there's a list of challenges that you can encounter, and also what type of technology do you need to be successful in those. Station is mostly for medical interpreting. So now, like I mentioned, remote video remote is more for education and also for medical, for the telehealth, right? They're more and more common now. But the over the phone interpretation still continues to be something that it is used for medical, very much so. And then in the medical field, you know that there's over 25 million patients who are limited English proficient. So LAP is a term that is used. And if you have taken my classes, we have gone over those terms internally to refer to individuals that are limited in English, in the English language. So we wouldn't really discuss it in public and say, oh, are you LEP? We would just, to a client, we would say, do you need assistance, a translator, right? So here, there's a note here that there's only 2,500 certified interpreters in the United States. Just to give you just an idea of the discrepancy in terms of the big gap, in terms of the need for interpreters and the interpreters that are available. So yes, so consecutive mode, because it would be very difficult, right, to be talking at the same time that someone is talking on the phone. In remote video, it is easier to do a simultaneous, but at the same time, because of the sound, there's some challenges, and I'll address them shortly. So what do we need for video interpretation? So there's besides having your computer, it could be a laptop, it could be a tablet or a desktop. You also need your microphone, right? I right now in this case I have an additional microphone so that the sound can be better. Or perhaps if you're in an area where there's a lot of noise, perhaps you need a headset, right? And then you need your webcam. Some computers do not have a webcam, so you need to make sure that you have the equipment that you need to be able to do this. And like I mentioned, high-speed broadband internet is key, because I've been in many situations where everyone's internet has frozen, either mine on my end, or maybe the client, maybe a mother that I was doing an interpreting for individualized educational plan for special education. Or maybe even, like I mentioned, during a board meeting, I lost internet connectivity. So that is something that is key. And again, because it's remote, it could be someone that is local in your area. So distance, in terms of distance, it could be anywhere, right? And usually, again, for there's more and more telehealth taking place, especially with the shortage of doctors. So that's something that also, for convenience, after COVID, it just continued to be the trend. So like I mentioned, for the company that was contracted by my former school district where I work, they were really called on the spot, because we only had to call either 15 to 30 minutes ahead of the meetings to schedule an interpreter. So if you're working as a freelancer, you need to be good with your time management, especially if you're working with an agency or you're on call, because these things can happen on the spot, right? At any time. So really Zoom was really a game changer, especially when it came to video remote interpreting. It really put the interpreters on the front line. There were many things that had to be taken place during COVID that require interpreters, and that's when we became aware of the limitations, the challenges, but also the great opportunities for us to expand our business, right? Especially those of you that are thinking of going maybe freelancing. So I don't have to remind you that during Zoom, many were able to connect, but again, there were challenges, right, with connectivity. Maybe you were giving yourself, with a hotspot, you were giving yourself the connectivity, and it wasn't stable. So there's a lot of challenges. But again, what hardware do you need? What, the Zoom application, does it need to be running? Because I kid you not, I was logging into a meeting, and all of a sudden my Zoom said, oh, an update is needed. And then it started to updating. So I was late to that meeting. Luckily, I did not have to do a translation, but those are things that we need to keep in mind. We need to test it before, test it with a friend, test it with a relative to make sure, because there's a free version of Zoom. So I encourage everyone to get a free version of Zoom and try to test it with a friend, with a relative. Try to do an interpreting. Try it, because this is hands-on. This is how you're going to learn. Again, there's a free version of Zoom, so if you do not have one, please get one so you could start practicing. If not, I also recommend Google Meets. Google Meet is a great way to also practice your interpreting skills. I would say that maybe 60% of the IEPs that I did last year that I helped translate in the last 2 years were through Google Meets, and then the 40% were on Zoom. So Google Meet is also something that is it's on the rise, right? So in terms of popularity. I have a link there in your module. This module 1 is not stressful at all if you're familiar with your remote interpreting. But if you're not familiar, please read the information with more time and more care. Be careful about taking notes and understanding before you move to the next session. I want to make sure that there's no points of confusion. There is the ATA, the American Translator Association paper that is very interesting. I posted it there. Please go take a look at it, because it talks about the challenges and then how to tackle and the benefits of remote interpreting. So that's just one of the resources provided for you. Now, of course, just like we practice when we do in person, and we review the code of ethics, right, the same thing applies with the technology, that when we're using technology, be it just audio, or be it in a remote video interpreting situation. Same thing applies in terms of the code of ethics, which, if you have not reviewed them, you can find them in module 1, the code of ethics from the American Translators Association. But here are a few just to think about, when we're doing, and this could be audio or video remote interpreting. Same thing with accuracy. You want to make sure that you stay as close to the target language. Confidentiality is a big thing, especially if there's some issues that I will. Every time that I remember of a situation, of a personal experience, I always like to share with my students. So I remember at one point in time, a parent disclosed a very delicate situation about her son, and it really got everything. It really caught everyone by surprise. So I had to be really careful, because when it comes to confidentiality, you are just the interpreter and the translator. You continue to interpret what is being said. And yes, I was very shocked to hear that. And yes, I could see the faces in Google Meets of the principal and the psychologist. And other teachers that were there in the meeting when this mother disclosed what she disclosed, which is a confidential situation. But I cannot, and then impartiality, the other ones, avoidance of conflicts of interest. I could not make a comment. I could not say anything. I have to remain impartial, right? Neutral. I have to relate what she's saying and I have to translate as is. There's no visual or you cannot make any visual remarks, or you have to watch your body language, etc. And also respect. Yes, they're limited English proficiency. It could be a situation of maybe there's a single parent, or if you're working in the legal or even medical, there's a situation that might really embarrass the client, but you really need to treat everything with respect and just translate and interpret as is, right? Cultural awareness, because remember, if you've been in my other classes, we talked about the colloquial terms and medical colloquial terms and court, legal colloquial terms. So there's a need for us interpreters to know also and be aware of the cultural differences, so that we can know what limitations are, maybe even when we're faced with something that we need clarification that has to do with cultural awareness. Because for example, I had to explain to one of the people in the meeting for one of the IEP special education meetings 2 years ago, why the parent had to go to Mexico, right? There was a situation in that the parent had to travel to Mexico, just took the kid for 2 weeks and then came back. So cultural awareness, right? Of, had to go and pay respects because the mother died and had to take the kids. So also, what are your boundaries, right? As an interpreter, you just interpret, you can clarify, you can ask for clarification. And your professionalism, right? You need to be looking at the camera. You need to make sure that you maintain the same tone of voice. If somebody, one of the meetings got out of hands for, it was a legal case for the school district 2 years ago where the parent just started yelling and screaming at the principal. And you have to keep your professionalism and your same tone of voice. You're not going to start yelling, or you're just going to interpret as is. So professional development is very important, that you continue to learn. That's what you're taking this class. Some of you may be very advanced. Others might just be starting in this world of technology and how it relates to interpreting. But nevertheless, please always, be in this journey, be teachable. When it comes to professional development, I do want to emphasize the importance of staying up to date on the latest technology. So I would highly encourage, just like I encourage you to get the free version of Zoom, also try interpreting in Google Meets. I would highly encourage you to sign up for artificial intelligence for an app. Maybe it could be ChatGPT. And I will talk more about it in another module as to why I consider that is important, to stay, like, again, on top of the trends and up to date. And advocacy and duty to report ethical violations, right? Because you want to make sure that you're staying on top of your code of ethics, and that if something that is not correct, that you report that to whoever it is that you report. Either you're a freelancing, you need to report it to the company that hire you, or if I'm doing an IEP, then I need to report it to the folks. For example, this parent was really upset, right? And in the pre-session, which we're going to talk about right now, the parent related to me that she was bringing a witness because she didn't feel comfortable. She was going to bring a relative as a witness because she felt that she was being confronted by the principal. So I had to go and relay that to my management and said, hey, she's going to bring someone else because she doesn't feel that, she's being treated respectfully, and that her legal rights are not being protected. So that to me helped me prepare in the pre-session, because I knew someone was going to come already with a very her mindset was already very defensive. So does unfortunately not everyone has the opportunity to do a pre-session. Like I mentioned with this agency, with just 15 to 30 minutes, we would call and schedule an interpreter, and the interpreter had no knowledge of what we're going to do an annual IUP or a triannual every 3 years, or maybe we're going to do an amendment. They just jumped on and they started to translate. So to me, that's even more difficult. But in your pre-session, I would really do the prep. For example, let me give you some examples. If you're translating for a board meeting, I would go into the board docs. I would see the agenda. I would prepare myself with, okay, what are they going to be talking about? Do I need to research that term? Especially because now the materials for board meetings are posted 1 or 2 days before the board meeting, right? In most cases, right? So it would be best if you are going to be interpreting, doing video remote interpreting for some folks that are maybe just logging in remotely, because that is happening more and more with board meetings. Then in that case, I would go and prep myself, right? Which is what I did, and go see, okay, well, in this particular meeting, they're going to do a financial report. Oh, they're going to talk about this contract with a youth group. They're going to talk about this. So now I know what all the language and the terminology that I need to be ready, so that when they do a report, I can interpret correctly, right? And then the challenges when doing remotely, I highly, highly recommend that you see that, watch the videos that are there, and also that you read the articles from the ATA on some of the challenges, but also the opportunities, right? So if you have an opportunity to talk to the person you're going to be interpreting, again, just say, hey, I'm the interpreter. I just wanted to make sure. My name is Lilian de la Torre. I'm going to be interpreting for you for this meeting. Is there anything that you know I'm going to be interpreting from Spanish to English or from English to Spanish? Is there anything that you would like for me to know? In the IP world, we do not do that. In education, I never had an opportunity to have a pre-session, except for situations that were legal, when the parent would call me and ask me for X, Y, and Z. So I wasn't the interpreter. At the time, I was a special education teacher, teaching the student the government and the economics class. So that's how I met that parent. And I had to schedule the interpreters for those meetings, but I did have the opportunity to interpret for special education 2 years ago when I worked for another district. And in that one, I did not have an opportunity to get a pre-session with the client directly, but I did have time to do a pre-session with the teachers or others that had asked me to be in that meeting, so that they could prepare me. Hey, this is a parent, this is a legal case, they're going to bring an attorney. So then I knew what, and we're going to be discussing this. So that's, whenever you have an opportunity to do that, they're very helpful. So for those of you that are interested in becoming court interpreters, I think it's really important that you are aware that the language access plan for the Judicial Council, which is the entity that monitors and certifies the court interpreters in California, they did not pass that till recent years, right? 2015, 2016. And they had a pilot program for video remote interpreting the courts, because, as you probably all know, there's a shortage of court interpreters in many languages, in Vietnamese, in Spanish, in California. So I have in the PowerPoint, I have the timestamp here, where I would highly encourage you to go and watch that meeting for the samples, because they provide samples of this pilot program that they started, and the way that the technology that they use, the results for that pilot program. And that is what led to currently the courts having this program available. So I would like you to know what the history is and why it came about. And this is very recent. They did a pilot in 2019. They assessed it in 2020. And then it was until like 21, 22 that they got funding, and then COVID happened. So that got delayed. So it's pretty much basically in the works since last year, or a little bit more than a year and a half. So it's something fairly new in the courts, but I still want you to know how that takes place, because if that's something that you're considering doing, you need to be ready, right? Because that might be an opportunity that can comes up, and then you're like, I know how to do that. I know how to use the technology. Just to finish with this presentation, it is very important, especially if you're doing freelance, to take breaks. If you're doing constantly, you're on the phone and you're doing on-call audio interpreting, or you're perhaps doing video remote, just a reminder to also for self-care, using the right technology, the right lighting, your posture. If if you're sitting for extended period of times, maybe you could get through your work a standing desk, or you could just make sure that you take care of yourself as well, in terms of the taking the necessary breaks, because it could be very tiring and stressful if you're a freelancer and working for you're on call, and there's a huge demand, and they're just calling you like on the hour, and you're like not taking breaks. So just want to stress the importance of taking breaks. So I'm gonna try this. This is the first video, and I'm very passionate about video remote interpreting, but I'm gonna try to keep all the videos under 10 minutes. So this was an exception, because you only have a discussion for module 1, so I got away with it. But just remember that the most important thing for you to take away is that you need to practice Zoom interpreting. You need to practice with Google Meets. You need to know what video remote interpreting looks like at the court if you want to become a court interpreter. So make sure you go and click on those links. And more again, it's something that is being used in the medical field. So there's and also in education. So we need to be prepared, right? We need to be prepared, and we need to uh know the latest in technology, and how to, because it's also how you project your voice, it's how you look at the camera, and being very careful, again, like I mentioned, not with your body language, because like it could get maybe very heated conversations when it has to do with special education, school meetings, and you just need to keep your coolness. You need to be professional. You do not need to, you need to be neutral, and just stay neutral to very professional. So that pretty much summarizes the video lecture for module 1. Thank you.